Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. If you are here, you know that we changed the name recently to The Authentic Path, and I am so grateful that you are here with us. I am doing a podcast today on how to know if you are burned out, how to recognize it in yourself, how to recognize it in your loved ones, and then what to do about it. Before I jump in, I want to share a quick story. I just came back from keynoting an event, the American College of OBGYN's Armed Services District. I was invited to go and speak and offer some coaching sessions for their members. And it was an awesome experience for a lot of reasons. One, I don't know a lot. I didn't know a lot about military medicine. And one of my best friends from college is a leader in the organization. And she is how I got connected to the organization. But it was fascinating to learn more about military medicine. If you are a military doc, if you trained in military medicine, thank you. Thank you so much for your service. And wow, there's a lot that you do, and it's really, really incredible. So thank you for your service. I see you. Uh, the other thing that I was reminded of, the national president of ACOG, the American College of OBGYN, was there. And just the way the world works sometimes, serendipitously, she had reached out to me on LinkedIn prior to this conference before she knew I was going to be there. And we had connected briefly on LinkedIn. And it turns out she and I had known each other from way back in the days when I was in residency in New York City. And I share this story because the world is tiny, the world is small. And one thing that she said when we reconnected, because she happened to be at the conference too, so I got to give her a big hug in person, and it was so lovely to see her again. But one of the things she said was how her mother had always reminded her of the importance of being really kind because the world is so small and you never know who you're going to see again. So just as a reminder that the world is tiny. And I had this realization a long time ago that there we are going to impact the lives of everybody we come across, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not. We're going to impact the lives of everybody we come across. That's just the way it works when you're walking around the world in this three-dimensional world in a human body. Your energy, your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, whether you smile at somebody when they give you coffee or you just grab the coffee from their hand, you're going to impact them. And so you have a choice of how you want to impact them. Do you want to impact them? And I'll just put it in three categories to make it easy. Do you want to impact them in a way that's negative, in a way that's neutral, or in a way that's positive? And whatever way you choose, you get to be authentic to who you are. You know, I am generally a very kind, very compassionate, very empathic human being. And sometimes I'm not at my best. So sometimes I'm introspective and I kind of want to be quiet or turn into myself. And I still have to maybe go on an airplane that day and be around people. And it wouldn't be authentic to me if I showed up at the airport, super, like high energy, smiling and hi, and how are you? And let me grab that coffee. But it would be authentic to me to show up and say, hey, thank you. Thank you for this coffee. And I'm using coffee as an example because it's a way that we tend to interact with strangers a lot, like the people that make our coffee for us. So you get to choose how you're going to impact people's lives, and you get to choose a way that will be authentic to who you are at your core and who you are in that moment. And know that you can always choose between negative, neutral, and positive. And I choose to always be neutral to positive and really positive because even in those moments where I am, giving myself what it is that I need by being a little bit more quiet or introspective, I still get to be kind, and my energy is still one of compassion and acceptance and kindness. And so you choose. So just to presence that before we start. Okay, so let's talk about burnout, how to know when you're burned out, and what to do about it. So this topic is so important because every time I work with professionals, with physicians, with other folks in healthcare, and any professionals, they come to me and they say, I actually don't know what's wrong, or I don't even know why I'm feeling like this, or how do I know if I'm burned out? So I think it's really important to just start with the super basics. Like what is burnout? How is it defined? And how do you know if you're experiencing it? So I'm going to explain what it's like so that you can identify, is this what I feel? Or you can start to think about your friends or your colleagues. Is this what they're feeling? Because that way you can also support them, especially if you're a leader. If you are a leader and you're starting to recognize these qualities in your team, then you've got to figure out, like, what is it that my team needs? Leaders have an interesting role because, part of our role is to take care of our people when we are leaders. And what I've come to learn after 20 years of leadership is the more we take care of our people, the more our people are able to take care of themselves, but of the outcomes, the more that they're able to create what it is that we all want, the vision that we have, the mission that we all have. Our people are able to achieve that and create that, all of us together as a team, when they are their best selves. And so what is it that we need to do to support them? So the first thing you need to know is, how do they show up when they're not their best? Okay, so what are some signs of burnout? So burnout is defined by the following three things. Number one, being exhausted. Okay, so what do I mean by exhaustion? So this can show up as sleeping 8 hours a night, but waking up and still feeling totally drained and walking around saying things like, man, I don't know why, I'm just so tired. I'm exhausted all the time. I'm so tired. Okay, so that's physical. And the other one is emotional. You might just be emotionally exhausted. It could be a type of thing where someone asks you, how are you? And all of a sudden you just want to break down in tears and start crying. So this is how I knew I was burnt out because I've had clinical burnout twice in my career. And I remember the second time it was this right here. Somebody had asked me, how are you? And I thought I was going to start crying. And I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And I am an incredibly like in touch with my emotion type of person. I'm compassionate. I cry at Hallmark commercials, but I normally don't cry when people just ask me, how are you? So that was a big one for me to be like, okay, something is up here. Okay, so that's exhaustion. That's the first one. The other one is depersonalization. This is the one that's the most obvious to people. So this is also known as just like cynicism. Cynicism, or having, in medicine, we call it poor bedside manner, when people are always complaining, venting about their patients, venting about their jobs, venting about the people around them. That's called depersonalization. So, or also known as cynicism. So this is the one that's the most obvious because it's the loudest, because people are like in your face talking about things, or you can notice their energy. It's so negative all the time. So that's the second one. And the last one is a lack of personal accomplishment. This is when people start doubting the meaning or quality of work. It could show up also as apathy. And that's why I think it's so important, because when you're feeling apathy or like futile, like, who cares? My work doesn't really matter. You're just going through the motions. I see this a lot with leaders because you've been doing the same job for so long. It's tied to who you are now. It's like your identity. I see this with physicians a ton too. So now your identity is tied to your career, who you are, or in your leadership roles. And then you're starting to feel apathy about it, but it feels so uncomfortable to feel apathetic because this is who you are. How can you be apathetic about who you are? And it really creates a sense of, it's like discombobulating for the brain. And you think you need to keep pushing through, you'll just get over it, it'll be fine, oh, whatever. And some of you listening, if you've experienced any of this, your livelihood is also tied to your job. So you need to work to make your whatever financial goals you have, or just to make the ends meet. And so when you start to feel apathy, you keep thinking you just have to keep pushing through. And you don't realize that what you're experiencing is burnout. Okay, so burnout is defined as exhaustion, depersonalization, also known as cynicism, and a lack of sense of personal accomplishment, where you start doubting the meaning or the quality of your work. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story to see my story of burnout, because I think it might help all of you see like how it shows up. So I experienced burnout twice. The first time I experienced burnout, oh my gosh, I was like, so I had been experiencing so many small stressors, and thinking that I could deal with all of it myself. And I had been so stressed out that I was now somatically, physically in my body experiencing signs of stress. So I came to learn during that time in my life that I grind my teeth and I clench my jaw when I'm stressed. And I didn't know that right away, but I was so stressed out that I was dreaming about work and dreaming about like the clinical schedule and stuff like that at night. And I started having really bad jaw pain. And my jaw pain got so bad, I thought something was wrong. I thought I had maybe a cavity. I hadn't had a cavity since a kid, but I was like, something's clearly wrong. So I went to the dentist, and the dentist did all of these things and it was like, everything's fine. I was like, well, clearly this guy does not know what he's talking about because something's wrong. And then he asked me if I was stressed at night. He's like, sometimes when people are stressed, they clench their jaw at night. And I was like, holy smokes. I had no idea. I was so disconnected from my mind and my body at that time that I had no idea I was experiencing that. The funny thing about that is, I had taken on so much stress that I had just normalized it. So I'd always had like sore shoulders. I carried my stress in my shoulder. I used to anyway, carry my stress in my shoulders. So I'd always have like a sore neck or sore shoulders, and then whatever. I would just go get a massage, I thought, and it would never go away, but at least it'd feel a little bit better. Or I always had trouble sleeping. I was never really sleeping through the night. I was always thinking about work. So my sleep was disturbed. I was carrying all of these signs of burnout or stress, and I had no idea until it got so bad that I was having really bad jaw pain. That's a problem because I like to eat. I especially like to eat nachos, and I couldn't eat chips because it hurt. It hurt my jaw. And so that was the first time. Okay. So the second time, though, the second time it showed up with what I mentioned when I almost started crying. So I remember I had a touch base with the person I was directly reporting to, and he said, "How are you?" And it was on Zoom because this is in the middle of COVID. And I immediately turn off my screen because I think I'm going to start crying. And I try to compose myself quickly. And I turn my screen back on and I say, who cares? Anyone can do my job. What does it matter? And as soon as I said that, and by the way, the second time I had burnout was during COVID. I was already the national wellness director. I knew all of these tools. I was a national wellness director for a large national physician organization. And this was happening to me. It was so now that I look back, it's like, of course, it was happening to me. And I'll tell you the common thread between those two stories. Because the first story, I was a mom of two young kids under 3, and I was a physician leader, and I was doing all of these things, taking all these actions. The second time, I was still a mom. I still had two young kids. I was still a leader in a hospital, and there was still a bunch of stuff that I was doing. And what I realized as I look back is that the common thread between those two things is that I never wanted to ask for help. I always wanted to deal with everything on my own because I thought I could, because I'd always dealt with things on my own, because it showed how strong I was. Because not dealing with it on my own, this is the limiting belief I had. Limiting beliefs are stories or thoughts that we tell ourselves that are not giving us the results that we want. So the story I had told myself is that if I asked for help, it would mean that I was weak, that I was showing my vulnerability, that I should be able to do this all by myself. And so I never asked for help. And, truthfully, when I look back, I don't even know if people, and actually, I know for a fact that people from the outside looking in had no idea what was happening, because I remember telling the story later, and some people that knew me really well at the time were like, wait, what happened? I had no idea that was going on, because I was really good at pretending everything was okay. Does that really, can you relate to that? Anybody listening here, can you relate to always pretending like things are okay when they are really not? That was my story anyway. Okay, so let's go on, because here's the thing about burnout and stress. So burnout happens after you have chronic exposure to stressful events. So acute stressors, small stressors every day cause you to experience chronic stress. So one stressor, not a big deal, but multiple stressful events after a period of time, that's called chronic stress, and chronic stress is what creates burnout. So, but not all stress is bad stress. Okay. So not all stress is bad stress. So I'm going to share with you something that I think is really important for us to know. And this is something that comes out of what's called the Yerkes-Dodson law from 1979, and it's the stress curve. So if you were to graph out stress versus your physical activity or your mental activity, and on the x-axis, you put stress from low to high. So stress from low to high on the x-axis, and on the y-axis, you put your physical or your mental activity from low to high, low on the bottom, high to the top. What you start to see is that when you are over to the left of the curve, so no stress at all, so your stress curve is very, very low, what tends to happen is that your physical and mental activity is also very low. you're bored, you're dissatisfied, you're kind of frustrated. It's like, ugh, this is so, and this is different for everybody. Like, listen, I'm an ER doc. I chose ER because I like physical activity. I like to be around things. I like to do things. But not everybody likes that. Other people would rather sit, like my colleagues that are neurologists, they want to sit in a room. They don't want it to be super crazy all the time. So this stress curve is very personal to each individual, but it's important to know where you land on the curve. Okay. So if we're talking about the left side of the curve where there's not a lot of physical activity, where the stress levels are kind of low, you're going to be bored. Now, as you move a little bit over to the right of the curve and your stress activity goes up a little bit, the stressor goes up a little bit, you also move up on your physical and mental activity. So when you move over, that's where you are now stimulated. And what we start to notice is that your mental activity feels creative and innovative, and you start feeling really satisfied with who you are and what you're doing. Okay. So if you are in emergency medicine, we talk about how many patients per hour can you see? And there's a certain patient per hour that feels good. It feels like we're in a flow state. Like, yes, I can see, 2 patients per hour. And that's actually, if you think about it in the ER, that's a lot because in that hour, in those 2 patients that you see in that 1 hour, you have to see them. You have to examine them. You have to diagnose them. You have to treat them. You have to make sure that they get all their imaging and their tests. And you have to make sure you call consultants. And then you have to do your charting for them. And if there's any procedures, you get to do that. So that's what we mean by 2 patients per hour. I know that sounds like a lot, but you get into a really great flow when you're in the ER. So, but just as an example, so 2 patients per hour feels for a lot of people like, okay, like, yeah, I can do 2 patients per hour. But some people are like, no, I want 1.5 or 1.7 patients per hour. And others are like, I'll take 2.3 patients per hour. Okay, so whatever that is for you, that's your healthy, that's your creative, innovative, that's right. That's like where you are in your flow state. Now, as you move over on the x-axis of stress over to the right, what starts to happen when more stress comes in than you can actually handle, your physical and mental activity starts to drop again. So now you're fatigued and you're exhausted and you start questioning, like, are you good at this? That's where imposter syndrome shows up and low self-esteem. Now, the more you move over to the right, the more stressors you have, the lower you get on the physical and mental activity axis. So the y-axis goes down. And when you are chronically over to the right, chronically experiencing stress, that is where burnout happens. Now, if you just envision what that graph looks like, so it looks like this upside down kind of U curve, upside down U curve, where way over to the left, where you're not doing anything at all, stress is really low, your mental activity is also not great. You're bored, you're dissatisfied, you can even experience frustration. And when you move over a little bit to the middle, your mental activity goes up. You're creative, stimulated, innovative. But as you move all the way over to the right, that's where you start experiencing fatigue and exhaustion. And the more you stay to the right, that's where burnout happens. So that middle part of the graph, that is stimulation, okay? That is known as your eustress level, EUSTRESS, eustress. Eustress means normal, healthy amounts of stress. That is stimulation. That is what we want. We want to find where is our zone? Where is our healthy stimulation zone? Anything over to the left of that is known as hypostress. You might be a little bit bored there. Anything over to the right is distress. That is where distress happens, okay? So when you think about that, you think about, okay, so there's a continuum here. There's a continuum. Sometimes I could be over where I'm really bored, but sometimes I could be over where I'm experiencing so much stress that it could be traumatic. So we call this the stress trauma continuum. And that is what essentially that graph, the Yerkes-Dodson law teaches us, that there's a continuum between stress and trauma. So, and that's what we all fluctuate between. We all fluctuate in between being bored sometimes to thriving to experiencing crisis when we're chronically over to the right. So healthy stress, the one in the middle, that stimulation, that supports us. That's going to help us grow. That helps us become the best versions of ourselves, self-actualize, be in care for the community that we're caring for. So what do we do when we are in each zone? So let's talk about that. So when you are in your zone, when you are thriving right in the middle, your eustress zone, that's beautiful. How you know you're there is that you're focused. You are feeling productive. You're feeling pretty calm. You're able to communicate calmly and effectively. Whatever stress your life throws your way, you can pause for a second and say, okay, yes, I'll do that, or no, I won't do that. And you're sleeping while you're eating, while you're exercising. You are proud of who you are, and you are proud of the outcomes you're creating. If you are in that space, that is beautiful. If you are in that space, you get to celebrate yourself. You get to let in the good, let in the fact that you have created that for yourself. When you let in the good, that's an act of neuroplasticity. And in positive psychology, what we have seen is that when you let in the good, it starts to rewire your brain for you to see the world positively, like, okay, I'm letting in the good. That's good for me. And you can release any ideas of guilt. Oh my gosh, the amounts of times I have coached people on this of they're in the good, they feel so good, they're doing all this, and then they all of a sudden this like thought of like, oh my God, but I feel so guilty. Look at all these other people who are struggling. I should go help them. And the world is not like this for everybody. And yes, all of that is true, but that does not mean that you need to hold on to that guilt. You deserve what you created for yourself. You can be there. And when you let in the good, you letting in the good allows others to let in the good around them too. When you go and shift into guilt and you start just like being miserable and creating suffering, you're creating suffering for everybody around you. So when you let in the good, it's good for everyone. When you shift into suffering, you create suffering for everybody. You think that you're actually helping other people when you start feeling guilty, but guilt does not help anybody. Helping helps people, not feeling guilty. So you want to be able to use those moments of thriving to figure out like, okay, if I'm in this moment of thriving, what would be even better? Like for me, for example, when I'm thriving, I know that my mission on this planet is to be in service to the world, make this world a better place. So when I'm thriving, I'm like, okay, what can I do? So for example, when I'm in the ER and I'm feeling in my good zones, I look at a colleague. Hey, how can I help you? Hey, is there anything I can do for you? Do you have any procedures you need help with? I go to the nurses. Hey, by the way, like, here's what we're doing. Anything I can do to like make it easier? Oh yeah, do you mind talking to that patient? They have all these questions that I can't answer. Sure. So you use those thriving moments to do what brings you joy. When I'm working, what brings me joy is to be in service. When I'm at home, what brings me joy is to read a book for fun. So do what brings you joy. Okay, hypo stress. Let's say you're all the way over to the left and you're feeling bored and you're feeling frustrated. What you want to do is recognize like, okay, so this is my hypo stress. Now, this is a very nuanced kind of something to recognize here because for a lot of folks, especially the people that I know are listening to this podcast, which are high functioning, they're like very like productive, smart professionals. What tends to happen is we are not comfortable with downtime because we have become addicted to essentially stress hormones, to cortisol and other stress hormones. So sitting down and just resting can feel so uncomfortable. And you think that what you need is to keep going. So I want you to just pause for a second because there's a difference between recognizing boredom or dissatisfaction. Like I'm in the ER and if it's like slow for 30 minutes, I'm chill. If it's slow for 2 hours, 3 hours, I'm like, oh man, I'm getting bored here. I'm gonna take a nap. Like if it's I'm getting bored. I'm not really gonna take a nap, but you get what I mean. So it's really important for you to recognize if I have downtime and I don't feel good about it, like I feel, and how you know is how you feel. Like, do you feel guilty? Do you feel unsettled? Do you feel restless? Like, oh, I gotta move. Those are signs that you might be addicted to cortisol and stress hormones. That is different from feeling bored and dissatisfied because there's just nothing to do. I had a conversation with a very, very dear friend of mine who is incredible leader, physician, does all these amazing things in the world. And I was talking to her about like a lot of these topics. And she was like, yeah, it's funny that you say that because I never feel like I feel guilty when I just don't want to have downtime. I just want to do stuff. I feel totally fine. And I was like, really? Have you ever like noticed how you feel when you're completely disconnected? She's like, oh, funny that you say that. She went on a vacation with her family. They went to this really remote place and she couldn't get access to her emails or her work emails. And so she had to unplug. And so she was like, oh, I guess I can't check my emails. So it was 7 days of not checking emails. And she's like, oh my gosh, after just like a day or two of that, I felt so much better. I felt so relaxed. I was so present with my kids and my husband. And I was like, that's how you know, because usually what we're reacting to is cortisol overload. So usually whenever, for those of you listening, if you go on vacation and you catch yourself being like, oh my God, I need a day to de-stress before I can enjoy my vacation. Those are signs that you're probably coming off of a cortisol overload. So I definitely had that. And man, I had that. So just know it's totally normal and it's something that you can deal with. However, if you are actually experiencing hypostress, let's say you have downtime and it's getting boring and it's dissatisfying, then here's some actions for you. Number one, just check in with yourself. Do you need restoration? Like my girlfriend that I told you about, who actually took that time to restore, and she was really grateful. It was really beautiful. If you need that, take it. But if you don't and it becomes persistent, you've got to start figuring out, okay, what can I do different? If this is at work, maybe I need to ask for another project and be thoughtful about it, right? You don't want to overload yourself, but you want to start considering making changes. If it is boring, maybe you pick up a really fun project at home that you can do at home. Whatever you pick up to do, it doesn't have to be work. It could be creative outlet. Maybe you decide to pick up painting or music or reading a book for fun. When was the last time you read a book for fun? Wouldn't that be amazing? Okay. So now let's say you move over to the right side of the curve. The right side of the curve is where we experience, again, distress. Okay. Now there's a few different parts of distress. There could be the distress that most of us are experiencing, where we're kind of going through the day just surviving. We're just like, we get up, we haven't slept enough, but you're checking off all these things off your to-do list, and you have to get your kids to school, and then you have to go do this and this and this and this. That is that I call that just surviving. So that's distress, but it's a surviving level of distress. You're just right over your flow state. When you are there, the signs that you are there is that you're probably irritable. You're probably not present with the people that you love. You're not present with your kids. You catch yourself maybe snapping at people that you love when normally you would have been pretty patient. Maybe you're snapping at your patients or your nurses at the hospital if you're a doctor. You feel fatigued or tired. Your performance is inconsistent. Sometimes you're really good at things, sometimes you're not. You make poor choices on what you're eating. All of a sudden, you choose to eat something you normally wouldn't have eaten, like extra carbs or sugar or stuff like that. And sometimes you catch yourself isolating, like you just don't want to connect and you tell yourself, I just don't have time. Okay, so those are signs that you might be in survival mode. What you do if you're in survival mode, the number one thing to do is look at all of the things that you do and get rid of the things that are not essential. You have to start making time to have more expansive life. So start getting rid of the non-essentials. And you might be thinking everything is an essential, but honestly, every time I do this work with my clients and they make a list of the stuff that they do and we go through and we're like, really? You really need to be the person that does that? No one else can help? All of a sudden they're like, okay, maybe this person can do this, or maybe I can hire this, or maybe I can order, my groceries to be delivered so I don't have to go to the grocery store. All of a sudden they start creating all of this time for themselves, and it's really beautiful. What you also want to do here for the surviving is you want to add coping rituals. One thing I didn't say when you're in your thriving state, what's really, really important when you're in your thriving state is to notice what your coping strategies are. Notice like the habits you've created. So for me, for example, I meditate every morning. I go to the gym every day. I drink a ton of water. I make sure my meals are healthy. I connect with people that I love. That's my regular maintenance. When you find yourself in your distress, in your survival mode, you want to go back and say, hey, hold on a second. What is it that I do that feels good to me? Maybe it's just like 15 minutes of exercise a day. Maybe it's drinking tea quietly by yourself. Maybe it's going to sleep at a reasonable time. Notice those coping rituals, the things that you say, man, I used to be really good at that, but now I'm not. And it's so hard. Notice that, because those are the things that you actually need to call back into your life to move from survival back into your high functioning flow state. Okay, the other thing you want to do is make sure that you are not isolating yourself. Isolation is exactly what we do when we're not in our best places. When we're not in a good place, we isolate. We isolate because we're ashamed. It doesn't feel good to be stressed out. It doesn't feel good to not be your best. And so instead of connecting with the people you love, you tell yourself, I don't have time. But one of the actual antidotes to distress is human connection. So you want to connect with low maintenance, so people that do not suck your energy away, but people that are going to be there for you, supportive, someone that just holds space for you to talk. Like anyone that you can just sit with and just be in connection with, that's co-regulating. That actually really supports you. So you want to not isolate. Maybe you just cuddle with your child if you have a kid at home, or with the fur baby. That by itself is going to help you secrete really good feeling hormones, and it's going to feel so much better for your body. Okay. And of course, mindfulness. I talk a lot about deep breathing exercises, and I have a ton of self-regulation exercises. I have a worksheet on my website, vanessacalderonmd.com. If you go under resources, there's a resource you can download there. I call it the self-regulation cheat sheet. And I walk you through and teach you all of these different things you can do to regulate your mind, your body when you're feeling stressed out or in survival mode. They're all super simple and highly effective things that you can start doing right now. So go check that out if that's something that you think would serve you. Okay, so we talked about surviving when you're in distress. Now, if you continue to move over to the right side of the stress curve, you're no longer in survival mode. Now you're struggling. That's higher distress. Okay, so now you're moving a little bit over to the right. How you know you're struggling is because you're going to feel anxious. You might start feeling hopeless. You might actually start feeling the emotional exhaustion that I talked about with burnout. You're no longer able to concentrate. Now you're having pain in areas that you normally don't have pain. Remember me and jaw clenching, or your shoulders are sore, or you're noticing that, this like rash that you get once in a while. Maybe you have eczema or psoriasis. It's flaring up all of the time. Those are signs that you might be struggling in high distress. All of these autoimmune things that we've experienced in life, maybe you have eczema. I used eczema as an example, but also psoriasis or any other rash. Those things tend to flare up. If you get cold sores, for example, you'll notice, or even chalazions or hordeolums, also known as styes. If you get styes in the eye, you will notice how those things start to flare up when you're experiencing more stressors in life. That's because that's what the body does. The body's like, hey, hold on, I'm not able to take care of myself. Because all of these stress hormones, which normally support us in taking care of ourselves, they're now on overload, and now we can't use them to take care of ourselves. So another sign that you might be in this space is that you're catching yourself doing things you don't normally do. And these are maladaptive coping mechanisms, like you're drinking a little bit more alcohol than normal. You're having more sugar than you normally do. You are really avoiding what you're feeling by watching a ton of like social media, like Netflix or whatever you stream, or you catch yourself doom scrolling. Those maladaptive coping mechanisms are things that we do when we're trying to avoid something that does not feel good. And anxiety does not feel good. Emotional exhaustion, feeling hopeless, those things don't feel good. And so we take these coping mechanisms that are not supportive. They're not going to help us. That's how we know we're in high distress. Okay. So what do you do? What are the actions you can take if you're here? Number one, notice your basic needs. The three most basic needs, and in indigenous teachings, we say that the three most basic medicines are sleep, are water, and are the breath. So prioritize your basic needs. Start with sleep. It is fascinating how much somebody can transform and shift when they just start focusing on sleep again. So if you're noticing that that's what's happening, you're either cutting back on sleep or you can't sleep through the night because you're so stressed out, you got to start bringing in a lot of sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene, no phones, start meditating. You got to start noticing, like, there's great apps. So you can even Google some YouTube meditations for sleep. So you want to start doing things that are going to support you in going back to your basic needs. Make sure you're drinking a lot of water. Notice your caffeine to water intake. Notice your sugar to healthy whole food intake, or your carb to healthy whole food intake, and start shifting things around. Because when we're incredibly stressed out and we have cortisol flooding our body, we start craving things that cortisol asks for, like carbs. And so you want to make sure that you're catching those types of things and you shift back to your basic needs. And this is a really hard one, but you set boundaries. I have another free resource on my website. I think it's called How to Set Boundaries for something like that, How to Set Boundaries. And I highly recommend it. Go there. It's one of the very first resources. You can find it there. And it's so important because boundaries are hard for everybody, not just you. They're hard for everybody to set. But when you start to set them and you start to create time for yourself, holy smokes, do things change. It's really beautiful. And of course, you want to ask for help. Like when I look back at the 2 times that I experienced burnout, I know I had to experience what I experienced to be where I am today. And it is so fascinating because I think about like the very first time what happened, well, I won't go through all the details, but suffice it to say, we had all of these holes on the schedule, including a ton of night shifts. I was supposed to be out on parental leave, and I had just had a second kid. And I come back to work early because we have all these holes in our night shift schedule. And I wanted to help cover. I felt so guilty asking everybody else on my site to cover those shifts, even though I wasn't supposed to be there anyway, even though I was supposed to be on parental leave, even though I had just had a kid. And so I came back from maternity leave early, trying to figure out how to breast pump in the middle of the night and doing all of these things that you do when you're when you're a mom of a newborn and trying to do all that at work. And instead of just being like, okay, I will see if I can hire somebody else. Can I bring in somebody just as a per diem to help with the night shifts? Because I just kept thinking it was my responsibility. Over obligation, over responsibility will always lead to unintentional actions like overworking and things like that, that will lead to burnout. Okay, so that's struggling from high distress. Now, the last thing on the stress trauma continuum is trauma. So trauma happens when we experience burnout. That's crisis mode. So chronically over to the right, chronically experiencing stressors all the time and not taking care of yourself, that is where trauma comes from. Now, that's burnout. Burnout is a trauma response. We are in crisis mode. Again, we are experiencing thoughts like, I can't do this. I'm all alone. I must be the only one suffering. My job stinks. Some people have really bad anxiety or panic attacks. Your dreams become very vivid. Maybe you start having nightmares. You have what's considered an intrusive thought, which is, like your thoughts are telling you how bad you are at what you're doing. Maybe you start snapping even more. Now you're making like you're experiencing rage at things. You start making mistakes, things that normally would not cause a mistake. So if this is what you are experiencing, if you are experiencing either struggling high distress to burnout, what you want to do here, especially if you're burned out, you need professional help. You need professional help. If you are burned out, please, please, please seek help out. You can bounce back. It's 100% possible. 80% of human beings that are professionals that are working out in the world are going to experience burnout once in their career. But it doesn't have to define you. You can come back, but you need help. And there is nothing wrong with seeking help. It's actually a sign of so much maturity and so much growth when you seek help, because an immature mind believes you're supposed to do everything on your own. An immature mind believes I'll look weak or vulnerable if I ask for help. That's an immature mind. A mature mind sees the world for what it is. We are not meant to go through this world in isolation. We are meant to be in community, to seek support, to help people around us that help us. So seek support if you are experiencing this. There are people that can help you. There are mental health specialists that can help. If you have an employee assistance program, seek help with your EAP. Coaching is incredibly effective for this. There's been so much literature. I've published literature on how helpful coaching is. I can help you with this. If you need help and you don't have somebody that can help you, reach out to me. There's a link on my website of how you can set up a coaching consult with me, and we can talk through this. Seek help, because you are not being your best self. You're not being your most authentic self, and you are doing things that you normally wouldn't do, and it's not good for you. You deserve to feel happy. You deserve to experience joy. So seek help. If you can, take PTO. The thing with burnout, though, that's so important to know is it is not going to get better by just taking a vacation, because the way it came on is chronic exposure to stressful events. You need more than just a weekend away or a week away. You need more than that for burnout. That doesn't solve the problem. It's a band-aid. You feel better when you take some time off, but all of the stuff comes up until you get to the root cause. So request support from people that can help you. Remember that you are not alone. Again, close to 80% of people report experiencing burnout once in their career. So if you are experiencing it, you're with the majority. Most people do. Do not make this like a weakness about you. It's not because you're weak. When you do that, it creates shame, and shame isolates us. It keeps us stuck. It keeps us from healing. Human connection creates healing. Reaching out for support creates healing. Do what it is you need. Reach out to me if you need to. I would love to help you with this. If you don't have anyone else you can trust that you can reach out to me. I would love to help you. And I'm really great at this. This is what I do. Okay, so some final reminders for all of you. Stress is going to exist. Modern life is full of stressors. We live in a world that is incredibly full of stressors. Most of us are walking around with a baseline level of stress that we don't even realize that is over to the right, not our healthy levels of stress, but slightly over to the right. Remember that stress exists on a continuum from restoration when we're experiencing hypostress, which is good, healthy stress, or what I call stimulation, eustress, normal levels of stress, over to the right, where we start experiencing distress from toxic stress all the way over to trauma. So again, not all stress is bad stress. The healthy levels of stress or eustress is actually cardioprotective. It's cardioprotective. It's good for our heart when we're experiencing stimulation. Healthy stress also drives growth. It drives fulfillment. That's what we want in our lives. If you will catch yourself over in the bored place, restore if you needed to restore. And if you are restored and you're still feeling bored, maybe it's a signal for change. That's okay too. If you are chronically over to the right, chronically stressed out without taking time for recovery, that's where burnout happens. Help is available. Don't forget, help is available. I can help you. I would love to help you with this. And check out your hospitals or if you have most employers will have something called an EAP, an employer assistance program. So check out your EAP, seek out a mental health specialist. But coaching is highly effective, and this is exactly what I do. So I can help you with this too. All right, sweet friends, it was so wonderful to have you here today on our first official podcast episode of The Authentic Path. I hope you can use what you found here today to walk in alignment with yourself to make sure that you are being true to who you are. All right, sweet friends, I will see you next week. Adios.